Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us. My name is Esther Shirazi, and I'm a licensed associate real estate broker with the BEHFAR team. I organize this event because I speak to so many people who would love to own a home one day, but they're not sure where to start. Some people are concerned about the mortgage rates, their credit scores, and whether they can even qualify to buy a home. The truth is that every buyer's situation is different, and there is no one size fits all answer for anyone. So that's why we organized this tonight. I'm here and lucky to be with two excellent professionals to join me. We have Aryeh Brecher from FM Home Loans, who will answer all your mortgage questions and financing. And we have Neil Schwartz with TNB Architecture, who will answer all your questions regarding your expansions, property, any questions that you might have in regards to buying a home. So thank you all for joining us. And please feel free to put your questions in the chat if you're too shy to ask them. If not, you'll raise your hand, and at the end, I'm going to introduce everyone. They'll speak a little bit, and then we'll be so happy to answer all your questions. Thank you so much. Aryeh, would you like to say a few words? Introduce yourself a little bit?
Absolutely, absolutely. So my name is Aryeh Brecher. Thank you, Esther, for the intro. It's a pleasure working with Esther and the BEHFAR team. I've worked on many transactions together, and one thing that comes to mind is honesty. Everybody in the BEHFAR team. It's a theme across the BEHFAR team. Service. Yeah, everybody can give service, but it's very rare you feel the honesty when you're speaking to everyone at the BEHFAR team. So thank you for that. It's a pleasure to work with you. Looking forward to talking. Esther, do you want to give the first presentation? You want me to? Whatever.
So it's really, I hope the whole concept of tonight is for people to ask us questions. So really just for you to quickly introduce yourself, tell you what you do, and then Neil, and then I'll do it at the end.
Sure,
Because I
certainly.
think we're all going to overlap a little bit.
For sure, for sure. So, again, I've been in the business for 12 years, I think, 11 and a half years. Um, Work at FM Home Loans. We're a bank. We're direct lenders. We're not a broker shop. We do everything in-house. And what I've had the pleasure of doing for the last 12 years is helping predominantly first-time home buyers who are, you know, looking to buy their first home. And what people don't realize and they take it for granted is that for many, it's the most important and the biggest financial decision of their life, right? I always get to people who are like, "Yeah, it's okay, just give me the mortgage," right? I'm like, how many times do you have $1 million in the bank, right? How often do you get $1 million? And the bank's giving you a lot of money, right? It's a big transaction. It's something that you're going to be paying off for 30 years. So I'm here to, help guide people throughout the process. I remember our first time home buyer event that me and Karen did probably 11 years ago. And somebody I closed the house for them like 5, 6 years after that first time home buyer event, right? You never know, when you're going to buy a home. You got to be prepared, and that's really the goal tonight, to be prepared.
Thank you. Thank you, Aryeh. Neil, would you like to introduce
Sure.
yourself?
And I'll mirror Aryeh's statement. Everyone who I've, ever dealt with across the BEHFAR team has always been, extremely committed to their clients and just, nice about it and always just trying to get them what they need and make sure that they get the right service and everything out of them. So it's always a pleasure. I'm Neil Schwartz. I'm an architect, licensed architect in New York, New Jersey, Massachusetts. And I've been doing this for about 20 years. I have about 10 years ago, I started a small architecture and interiors firm, and we do full service architecture, interior design, construction management, really taking clients, from, people that aren't sure what they want to do to people that know exactly what they're looking for and walking them through projects or handling everything that has to, happen during a project. And what we often see, especially with first time homeowners, but really with, many people looking for homes, is that there are, we'll get calls from people that buy a house, and they bought a house and they wanted to do, this renovation or that renovation, or expand, or assume that certain things were problematic, or other things weren't. And we then start to look at things for them, and advise. And what we're trying to do here is really advise people that are looking, and say, somebody wants to buy a house, they want to make sure that it can be big enough for their family. So we want to be able to look at that and say, okay, I think you guys could expand here. Looks like you guys have the space for it. In Brooklyn, in at the end of 2025, they rezoned a lot of the Flatbush neighborhood to be much more advantageous to people building homes. So now you can build a lot more, without going through BSA and through the lengthy process. And we'd like to advise people what they can take advantage of, and what is, problematic versus not problematic. So any questions? We're here.
And
Thank you
yeah, and if
so, so much.
I mean, Neil, if I may say,
Yeah.
I would say one of the most common questions I'm getting, or calls I'm getting, over the last, I would say, couple months
Mhm.
are individuals who started construction, they're midway through, and they're like, uh-oh, I need a little bit more money. I need to cash out. So it's so important to be fully prepared before.
Yeah. Yeah. And one of the things that we like to look at with clients prior to anything going on is budget. That's sort of like tangential. It's not really part of what I thought we were going to discuss tonight, but you bring it up, and it is very important. You need to know how much things are actually going to cost. Construction is expensive. It's much more expensive than everyone sees on HGTV. And if you're going to do it the right way, and I know this may not be what I'm supposed to be saying, but if you're doing things the right way, and you're doing it with permits and with contractors that are above board, it's going to cost you a lot more. So people wanted, and there are many reasons to do it that way, but you do have to be prepared to know that things are not, you know, um, inexpensive.
And it's interesting because many buyers, when they come to look at homes, they always ask, what can we do? Which wall can we take down? Can we make it longer? Can we extend? And I always say you have to speak to an architect. I am not that person because, you take down the wrong wall, you're going to have a problem.
Right.
So we always redirect everyone to speak to someone who knows what they're doing. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
Do you mind if I chime in? I noticed, Esther, like the past few months, that always noticed it, but I'm noticing more so the past like half a year or so, that buyers call us up, and they're looking to buy. They're already starting to look. They want to see this home, that home. And then I'm like, okay, let's take a step back. Do you have a pre-approval? Do you speak to a mortgage broker? They sort of skip that step. Like they're like, oh, right, right. Like in their mind, they're saving, they have a down payment, or they have somewhat of a down payment. And they played around with numbers online to see what their monthly payments are. But they really skip that step of, oh yeah, I need to get a pre-approval. I need to speak to a mortgage broker. So maybe Aryeh could talk a little bit like, what is the process? If someone's on here tonight and they're listening,
Yes.
yeah.
So true, so true. I think today people feel much more empowered than they used to, right? 10, 12 years ago, it was, I don't know what a mortgage is, right? What's a mortgage? Now it's like, I know everything because I put it into ChatGPT, right? And we all know you get a lot of false information online. One of the biggest, the second I hear this, I say, just stop, is like, my friend told me, my friend told me. I was like, it's AI, stop with a friend, but but there's many different aspects to getting approved for the mortgage, for a mortgage. There's three main parts. There's the CIA: credit, income, and assets, right? And you need to have all three buttoned down in order to get pre-approved for a mortgage. C is credit, okay? And I have a presentation, but we're not going to bore you with bad visuals. We're going to do this, and then if anybody wants it, they could just send their email on the chat, and we could send it over. C is for credit. Now, besides for having a good credit score, there are certain things that Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, which are the big credit agencies in the US, what they look for. They want to see that there's no late payments, recent late payments on a mortgage. A lot of people co-sign for siblings, for brothers, for uncle, whatever it is, and then that individual has a late payment. They don't even realize it shows up on their credit. That's a big no-no. If you have more than, if you have a 60-day late within the last 12 months, or two 30-day lates, that's a problem. They're looking for collection accounts that show up. Now, it's very important to run credit well before you find a home, because if you have a collection or if you have anything wrong on your credit, and besides for anything wrong, if you have a 719 credit and we can get you to a 721 credit score, right? You're going to save tens of thousands of dollars over the life of the loan, because rates are based off credit score, among other factors, but credit score is impacted the most. So it's very important to run credit. A lot of people have this fear of, I don't want to run credit because my score is going to go down. So there's two real answers to that. Number one is we have access to run a soft pull, which is like a Credit Karma style pull, which it doesn't give us everything, but it gives us enough for the pre-approval. It's usually within target, right? So that doesn't affect your credit score. But B, you're sort of paying off your credit cards in a timely fashion so that you have good credit to buy a home, right? Now is the point where it's time to run credit, right? There's two things you're saving credit for: buying a home, leasing a car, right? So obviously credit, big part of the mortgage, process. You have to have a certain score in order to qualify, period. And that's generally a 580 or 620. However, like I said, the higher your score, the better the rate. And it goes in tiers of 20. So 719 to 720, you're in a different tier. 759 to 760, different tier, up to 780. Above 780, you're all in the same boat. The next step is income. And this is, I would say, the second to toughest, or the toughest part for my local community-based buyers. The reason is because a lot of us have very creative accountants. Now, when you're a W-2 employee and you're getting a base salary, which doesn't fluctuate, it's pretty simple to calculate your income. However, if you are self-employed, you run your own business, if you are hourly, if you're bonus-based, even though you could be making $500,000 right now, right? You made $500,000 this year to date, and you could still not qualify for a mortgage if you don't have a history of making that the last 2 years, right? Because we have to average out that income. Now, there's a lot of different ways around this, and there's a lot of ways to plan to get approved for a mortgage, right? It's, the way you save for retirement, your retirement planning. So there's mortgage planning. We sit with you and we say, okay, last year your tax return in 2024 showed $100,000. With $100,000, you'd qualify for this. But if you showed more, or if we moved around some expenses, we could get you to this. In addition, there's other style qualifications. There's no income loans, which is not really no income. There's other types of income. And again, I know I speak very quickly. I'm from Brooklyn. It's my nature. So if anybody has any questions, feel free to stop me. But that's the most important factor. Typically, you have to make double your monthly debt, sometimes a little bit more than double, right? It's called a debt to income ratio. So if your monthly mortgage payment is going to be $4,000, then you have a car that's $500, then you have a monthly minimal credit card payment for $500. So you have total debt of $5,000, right? You need to be making $10,000 a month to qualify. So that's the rule of thumb. Now, again, sometimes it's a little bit, you have to make a little bit more. You have to be at 43% debt to income ratio, but that's a good rule of thumb. The last part, which is also a very, very tough part for my from buyers, are assets, okay, money, right? So people think that they just have to come to closing and show that they have enough money in the bank. However, banks are required to look through all deposits into your statements for up to 60 days before closing, okay? So the bank is calculating your income, saying you make $10,000 a month. That means anything over $5,000, generally 50% of your monthly income, they want you to explain. If you deposit cash more than $5,000, the bank will actually deduct that from your balance. So even though you're coming to closing with $200,000 and you need $200,000, the bank's like, you don't have enough money. You have 195, right? Cash, you can't source. Getting money from random sources, friends, borrowing money, getting money from Gemach, it's not so simple. And if we can't explain it, we can't source it. And just because we explain it doesn't mean the bank will let you use it. It has to be from an acceptable place. Now, you could get gifts from a family member, a relative before closing, depending on the loan. But you have to make sure that everything is talked through with a loan officer to ensure that your process will be painless. I always have two borrowers. One borrower who comes in prepared, who I talk to for 20 minutes before they went for a pre-approval. They're prepared, they're good to go, they have an easy process. And then there's a guy who knows it all, who comes in and has the worst experience ever. The mortgage in the if you ask people, people will give you horror stories of the mortgage industry. It doesn't need to be like that. It could be very simple, very easy process, close in 3 weeks, no issues. It's all about preparation. So that's my piece.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So, does anyone have questions for us?
Hello, how's it going?
Good.
Hey.
Awesome.
Great.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Aryeh, question for you. Many times I have buyers that get on the phone for the first time and they're like, I don't want to go through the hassle. Just tell me what you have. Just let me come and see this. And I feel like, how do I break down how simple it is to just like shoot a WhatsApp and like what would be needed in 30 seconds
I
to
gave a
give them?
guy pre-approval today in 20 minutes. It's basic stuff. Like today's day and age, you have ADP on your phone. You have your tax returns in PDF. It's tax returns. It's such simple things that you send over and boom, you get a pre-approval.
Okay.
It's really not that painless. Again, you just have to be a little proactive. 20-minute discussion, honestly less than that. 5-minute discussion and 2 minutes of pulling up your pay stubs or W-2s and you're good to go. You're pre-approved.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you
No, for
so
sure.
much.
And it's
Aryeh,
good
I
that
have a
you're pushing
question.
people to get pre-approved because I have a lot of times where people, agents think that, oh, I'm doing best by my client for not asking for a pre-approval, but then it gets messy later on, So it's awesome.
Aryeh, I have a question for you. So for those clients who are always worried about their checking their credit, what is your response to them? Because we get that all the time. I
For
tell
sure.
them they need to get a pre-approval because that's, your foot in the door to making an offer, like they're going to check my credit.
So I mean, again, I say like the people that are worried, typically they're worried for a few different reasons. Either they don't understand that, your credit score doesn't go down that drastic from getting a mortgage check, or there's usually something there, right? A lot of times there's something wrong with the credit and they're nervous. So they say, I'd rather not check, right? So there's two ways we could do it. Either we run a soft pull, which it gets within a range. It's close enough for a pre-approval, right? If I run a softball on somebody and their score is 800, I'm not worried, right? Right now, every once in a while, there is a situation where a softball doesn't pick something up and a softball doesn't affect their credit. So it really doesn't. You could run a softball every day, your credit score won't go down.
Right.
Or they could go to freecreditreport.com, download a copy of their credit report, or they have to understand that it's important. It will save you a boatload of money if you run your credit and you get it fixed. In addition, credit lasts for 6 months, right? So if we run credit now, they're good for 6 months. By the time 6 months comes up and they need to run another credit report, or it's 4 months, sorry. By the time that period comes up, the effect of the hard pull typically will have fallen away.
Right.
So yeah, it's not the end of the world.
Okay. Great. Thank you. Thank you. Anyone else have any questions?
You know what comes to mind? There's a house right near our office that just sold, and when they put it on the market, it didn't have any parking, and that was a big deal. Even though the listing agent kept telling us you could add a parking, and I'm sure you can. I wonder if Neil could talk to that a little bit, like in terms of the house was wide but very short, and many buyers came in. What can we do with the house? So our general answer we tell them is, what Esther referenced before, like we're not an architect, we'll put you in touch with, we'll give them architect's number. But the question is, could you speak to a little bit like what's the difference between an architect and an expediter?
Oh,
And like,
sure.
what does your conversation look like when we send a buyer to you? Like, what do you need from us when we send a buyer to you? Like that comes up very often.
Sure. So, I mean, with regards to parking, I don't know if you want, I'll give just a brief on that. Unfortunately, new parking curb cuts for parking and parking spots are very, very tough to get in New York. It's not that they're tough to get approval on, it's just that there are certain restrictions that have to do with how far you are from property lines and from other utilities and certain items that make it very tough for most, especially a narrow house, to actually legally put one in. Um, what further complicates it is that most of the parking you see in many areas of Brooklyn is just illegal. People decided to make a curb cut, they never filed it, and nobody complained, so there's nothing on the property. Or they park in the front yard and they're not really allowed to. But again, if nobody complains, there's really no recourse. So, so it does make it very hard for a lot of people that want to do it. Either they want to do it the right way, or they want to make sure that they can do it and, legally keep it as a right. Uh, in terms of, architecture versus expediting versus, code and zoning, um, architects are trained mostly, most of our training is spatial planning, right? Spatial planning and awareness and how to deal with that type of thing, design issues. And part of what we learn is code, and part of that code then has to do with the jurisdiction that we practice in. In New York City, expediters and code consultants, and I'll differentiate from them in a second, but essentially expediters were born out of the bureaucracy that is New York City. The fact that there's a lot of different forms and a lot of different ways that you have to file things and get things done and approved. And what used to be, architects and other professionals, or architects and engineers, didn't want to wait online an entire day for one project. So they would hire people called expediters that then took things into the city and got approvals. And over time, those expediters, some of them, the good ones, got a lot better at knowing the actual code, because they start to actually get things approved with the city's plan examiners and with other city agencies. So a good expediter is more of a code consultant, and they'll know this also, right? They'll be able to look into this, and they'll be able to look into basic code and zoning options, and know that type of thing. And we work hand in hand with some very good code consultants and expediters. You you have to know, I guess, there's a lot to know in the New York City zoning law. It's 12 volumes plus appendices plus certain things that come up that aren't necessarily there, and then certain rules that apply from zoning, certain rules that apply from building code. So there's a lot to know, and there's also uh, complicating it is the fact that a lot of things are up to the interpretation of the person who's reviewing it at the city. So certain things may may not be as clear, and you're kind of going according to those interpretations, which further complicates things. I don't know if that fully explains the difference between what expediters do and architects do,
Yeah,
but
it was very
you
clear.
Yeah.
And then what does the intake process look like, or what type of questions do you ask? Like, we're selling a house, it's like
yeah,
a 40 by 100. It's very short. They for sure want to extend. They
right.
don't want to knock it down. They come to you, like, what does that look like?
So they'll come to us with the general, property and where it is, and I can then look up the zoning code and see, what their allowable lot coverage is, how far they're allowed to go back, how high they're allowed to build. Sometimes people will come to us with, commercial properties, or they want to open. We've had cases where people want to open a daycare, or they want to open, some other type of use that's not allowed, right? So, we'll look at that also, or they want a three-family house. In certain zoning districts, you can only have a one or two family house. So things like that, uh, our stuff we'll just look at. As long as we have the address, it's usually all we need. Most of the time, and if they have a site survey, either from a closing, the last time the house was went through a closing, or um, a title survey. The one thing I will say, and I, you know, is that if you're planning on doing an extension on the house and you're getting a title survey, ask for an architectural survey, because you're going to need it anyway. And the surveying companies can do, a few different types of surveys for you. If they do an architectural survey, we then get the things that we need to submit to the building department, so that we don't have to get that done again. Otherwise, the same company will come in, do the same thing 5 months from then, and they'll charge you the same amount of money that they charged you the first one.
Okay.
So cool.
Good to know.
Thank you for
Thank you. Thank you.
I have a question. Hi. How are you? Sorry, I'm bathing. I'm watching my daughter in the bed at the same time I'm listening and watching the Zoom. So I apologize for the background noise if you hear any. So Neil, I have a question for you.
Rena, we can't hear you, Rena.
Funny, cute. So I have a question. So now with the rules changing as far as building and extending, is it automatic that people will get approved for extensions to go all the way back, like to go further back and build up where normally they wouldn't have?
So all of that is relative to how far back and how far up. Um, the the way that the zoning has been working in, let's talk about the Flatbush slash Midwood area. I'll because I assume that's the general area that you're talking about. Um, there there is a limited amount of zoning because it's a lower density district. So that means that you can basically have one and two family houses and three family houses of smaller size. And that's the point is to have the neighborhood. It doesn't have the same type of infrastructure for a larger neighborhood. It doesn't, have other things. So you have smaller houses. That's the idea. Um, Within the Frum community, because many people on the community board have wanted and needed larger houses because we have larger families, there has been an allowance written into the zoning code under what's called the Board of Standards and Appeals that allowed larger houses by what's called a special permit. Okay, this has been historically the last, 20 something years how all of the large houses in, Flatbush, and that's how they're all built, right? They're built because there's an allowance that you can go farther back than the zoning code would typically allow, and not really higher, but more farther back and more floor area.
Right.
So in 2025, one of the things that there were a few council people pushing for this, but essentially all of the items that were allowed through that used to be allowed only through special permit, they were written into the zoning code so that in these areas and in these districts, you're now allowed to build that large at what's called as of right, which means that you don't have to go through, you don't have to hire a lawyer basically, right? You
Oh,
can,
wow.
like, I can file it and I can get it approved, and theoretically I can get it approved in a couple of months, although that's a whole different, situation. That's a question of building department processes and how long that takes. That's a different question, but I don't have to go through zoning standards and appeals. So it's a more straightforward process. How far back you can build, um, I just, still, and I'll mention it again, a lot of what you see when you're driving around the neighborhood, a lot of what you see when you look at houses has been built illegally. So in terms of going all the way back to the property line, that's not allowed. It's still not allowed. It never was allowed, and it never will be allowed. Um,
Right.
it's just people do it, right? So there are, the truth is you can go till right now you can go till about 20 feet back from your rear yard, and you're depending on the zoning district, you can have a floor area of one. Like, so if you have a 4,000 square foot lot, you can now have a 4,000 square foot house.
Oh,
Whereas
wow.
that used to have to be something that you would fight for. But again, it does depend on the area, and also I know that I live in Marine Park. I'm sure that I know you guys have all over. Once you cross Nostrum, like that defined area is very specific. It's within a community board. Within certain community board districts, and it's from Avenue, I think it's from Avenue H, and south, and then from like Nostrand Avenue to Ocean Parkway or something like that. So it's not the entire Brooklyn, and it's not the entire South Brooklyn. You do have to know which areas you're in.
Interesting. Okay, cool. Very good to know. So really, I can't look at like when showing a house basically, and let's say the buyer is asking, oh, so could we extend and build a den, let's say,
Right.
and we always say, you have to speak to an architect or an expediter or whatever it is, and then they say, oh, well, look at the house next door, like they built out. So it's like we always say, well, we see that these houses built out, but we don't know. We don't know if they did it legally or not legally, but
Right.
speak to somebody. That's usually my answer.
Yeah.
Could we assume that because all the neighbors built out, let's say 5 or 10 or 15 feet, that it's allowed?
To be honest, no. I've seen blocks where, I
Oh,
mean, there's one block near me where I go down and every single house has like an entry in the driveway, right? They built out an entry that goes to the property line in the driveway. And like
Right.
at some point I was looking at these and I was like, oh, it's got to be allowed somehow. And then I looked, then another house recently finished near me and they kind of sort of finished and then I noticed that like a month later they had that addition. And like
Sorry.
people just do it.
Stop it.
So and a lot of times, someone does something, their neighbor refers the
Wait,
contractor
sorry,
to
one
do
second.
the
I'm
first.
sorry. I'm muting myself so that I could hear you and stop her from screaming.
Sure, no worries.
Thanks for explaining that. That was very clear. Thank you, Neil.
No problem.
Great, that was
Um,
nice.
hold on, I'll wait till she's unmuted.
No, you can continue. Yeah, she
I
said
will say this.
she's
Okay,
hearing. Yeah.
so essentially, you will see this often, and it doesn't, a lot of times, like I said, someone's doing something, they're doing a great, they did something their neighbor liked, their neighbor said, "Who's your team that did it?" They hired the same person who did it, just as illegally and just as illegally and just as illegally. So a lot of times that doesn't mean anything. But sometimes it means that it was all allowed, and sometimes it means that, that's the way all the houses were built. Like it really does depend. Any broker on here that wants to, before they're showing something that wants to run a property by, just let me know. And like I can look it up. It doesn't take that long to look up like the basics. To do a much deeper dive and start, telling them exactly how big certain rooms can be and where their kitchens should be and all that kind of stuff. Like that takes longer. That's probably, that's a longer zoning study, but for the basics of like how far you can build, that's usually pretty straightforward. So, you know, feel free to, we can let me know. And I've been working on maybe like a template that you guys can use. I haven't had a chance to really finalize anything yet, but I'm happy to do something like that where you guys can just plug a property in and say like, okay, this is one sheet on like you can probably go this far back and this far up and that kind of thing.
That's great. That would be amazing because people ask.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Esther,
Yes.
question for you. I know you've been doing this double the time that I have. I had a client that asked me last week because I said, like I was explaining the pros of working together with an agent, and he's like, I'm worried that if you take me to another listing, then that broker is more likely to take that, like the offer that comes in through their team versus if you have like, if I'm working together with you and you're showing me an outside agent. So do you want to talk to that a little bit about the that they're more likely that another broker is more likely and therefore they should just go directly to that agent? What's your experience been?
So there's, a level of, once you build a relationship with the buyer, and, as we all are on our team, thank God, we're all open and honest with them and let them know that the value that we bring to them is that we're there from the beginning to the end. It's not just about walking into the home with them, it's about discussing what their needs are. And even if it's through another broker, we're here to help them negotiate. We're here, we have their back, you know, and that's very valuable to buyers. Um, does it happen that, the other broker may take their offer? Listen, we get many offers on our homes. And at the end of the day, the owners have to decide which offer makes the most sense to them, right? So since we build on honesty and we build relationships with our buyers, with our sellers, that's really what we're working on.
Interesting. So there's the likelihood of their offer being denied because of they're working with a private agent. Have have you
So
seen
it
it?
so it also depends how the offer is presented as well, right? If we present we're working directly with our buyers and asking them where their starting point, where their end point is, and we try to really encourage them that if there's a number that they really can't go further, that they are comfortable to walk away from that number. right? And be okay without getting the house. But at the same time, if they have wiggle room and they can go to a certain number to meet the, what the sellers want, we're going to talk to the other agents and try to make the deal work. It's also our relationships with the other agents as well. When we're transparent, we hope everyone else is also transparent with us as well. So, just like we build relationships with the buyers and sellers, we're building relationship with all the brokers in the community as well.
Got it. And I like what you're saying about the agent helping them negotiate to have a stronger offer. Meaning, if a buyer comes in themselves, they might not present as strong of an offer. They might present either a larger number but weaker terms, so we can just help
Exactly.
place them.
Exactly. So when we present an offer, we're coming in with all the facts. What we know their down payment, we know what they're approved for. We're coming in prepared and we know how to present it. A buyer who is working on their own, and I've seen it happen. I speak to buyers who are, let's say, looking out of Brooklyn and they're trying to do it on their own and they get stuck. They get stuck because the other agent is giving them information they don't necessarily understand. So I always try to be a listening ear and a helping hand, even if I'm not directly involved, to help them if I can, so that they can get the house they want.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Anyone else? Okay. So if you have more questions, you can always send us an email. You can send me a WhatsApp, an email. Happy to answer them. Not everyone's always so comfortable on screen to speak. And we're all here to help you.
Esther, what about like your first time home buyer's guide? Maybe whoever
Yes.
is interested, we could put your email in the chat and you could send them over. The home buyer's guide is really amazing. Has a lot of great tips in there.
Yes, would love that. Anyone who wants it, whether it's in via email or even a hard copy, please let me know. I can mail you a hard copy as well. And happy to help and assist. And if anyone has questions in regarding to buying a home and they want to sit and pick my brain or one of my coworkers' brains, we are all here to help you, to make the dream of owning a home.
And there's a
Thank you
lot to
so
pick.
much,
Yes,
everyone, for
beautiful.
joining us.
Thanks for bringing
Thank
us
you,
together,
everyone.
Esther.
Thank you.
So nice.
Well,
Thank you for
great.
putting this together. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Thank
Esther.
you.
Take care.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Aryeh.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Esther.
Neil. Thank you,
No
everyone,
problem.
for
Thanks,
joining.
guys. And I'll put my email in the chat also if anyone has any questions.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Neil.
Okay.
Thank you, Esther.
Always a pleasure. Thank you so much. Okay.
Hi, Esther.
Thank you, Jen. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. We can close up.
Okay, I'll end this now.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.